the heart of this nation, under skies so blue,
there's a spirit that's stirring, values strong and true.
From the mountains to the prairies, from the cities to the sea, we stand for liberty, for faith and family. We're diving deep into the heart of what we believe.
Welcome to Deep Dive Podcast Show, folks. We've got a really interesting and, frankly, quite explosive situation brewing that connects some major political figures with a shocking fraud case. We're talking about Ilhan Omar, a surprising exposure from someone close to her, and then, on top of that, a really fiery comment from Jennifer Welch, stirring up a lot of controversy. This is all against the backdrop of a massive financial scandal. So, let's dive right in. What exactly is going on here, and how are these different threads intertwined?
It's truly a whirlwind, and you're right, the threads are very much connected. What we're seeing is a significant moment where Ilhan Omar, a prominent figure, has reportedly been undercut by her own ally. This isn't just some random critic, this is someone who was apparently close to her, publicly challenging her position or narrative, especially concerning this unfolding scandal in Minnesota. The timing is crucial because it aligns perfectly with this absolutely staggering $1 billion fraud catastrophe that is now, as you said, blowing wide open in the state. So you have an internal challenge to Omar's stance right when this massive financial issue is coming to light, and it's creating a very uncomfortable spotlight for her. What do you think?
$1 billion? That's just an astronomical sum. Can you elaborate on the nature of this fraud? What kind of schemes are we talking about here that led to such an immense loss? And what's the connection to these political figures? I mean, come on, right?
Absolutely. $1 billion isn't just a large sum. It's a testament to the scale and audacity of these operations. We're looking at a multifaceted fraud that spans several key areas. First, there are significant child nutrition scams, where funds intended to feed vulnerable children were allegedly diverted. Then there are Medicaid grifts, which involve defrauding a system designed to provide healthcare for low-income individuals. And on top of that, there's talk of intricate overseas kickback networks. Imagine funds going through various channels, with a portion illicitly returned to those facilitating the schemes. The connection to the political sphere, especially to Ilhan Omar, comes into play because she's a representative from Minnesota, and this is happening on her watch. The controversy is heightened by her response to it.
So, with such widespread fraud impacting critical public services, how has Ilhan Omar responded? And what do you mean by her finding a perfect scapegoat? Who are we kidding here?
Well, it's quite a calculated response from what's being reported. Instead of, directly addressing the systemic issues or the alleged involvement of certain groups in the fraud, the narrative seems to have pivoted. Omar has reportedly positioned Somalis as the real victims in the situation. Now, this is a very interesting move, because while any community can of course be victimized by criminal acts, framing it this way essentially, for some, shifts the focus from accountability for the fraud itself to a discussion about victimhood within a particular community. It's perceived by some as an attempt to divert attention or to, as you said, find a scapegoat, rather than confronting the perpetrators or the mechanisms that allowed $1 billion to be stolen from vital programs. It's a strategic narrative to control the discussion, you could say, couldn't one?
That's a powerful narrative shift indeed. Now, let's switch gears a little to Jennifer Welch. The title mentioned her making her nastiest comment yet. What was this comment, and how does it tie into the broader conversation about liberal white women and their growing backlash?
Right, so Jennifer Welch's comment has really added another layer of controversy to this already volatile situation. While the exact wording of her nastiest comment isn't explicitly detailed in the summary, the implication is that it was particularly inflammatory or divisive, especially coming from someone described as a white liberal wench in the piece. What we're seeing is that her comment, whatever it precisely was, has been highlighted as an example contributing to a growing backlash against liberal white women. This suggests a perception among some that certain progressive voices, particularly from this demographic, are making comments that are seen as out of touch, excessively judgmental, or even hypocritical. It touches on this broader cultural conversation where people are increasingly critical of what they perceive as moralizing or prescriptive rhetoric from certain liberal commentators, especially when it seems to ignore complex realities like the fraud we just discussed.
So it's not just about one comment, but about how it fits into a larger pattern of perceived behavior or rhetoric. And this connects to the idea of historical truths progressives refuse to acknowledge. Can you expand on what those historical truths are and why their acknowledgement or lack thereof is so important in this context?
Exactly, it absolutely connects to that larger pattern. The historical truths mentioned are global slavery, biblical land claims, and America's founding. Now, why are these significant? Because for some, the progressive narrative, at times, tends to oversimplify or selectively highlight aspects of history to fit a particular agenda. For instance, when we talk about slavery, the progressive discourse often focuses on transatlantic slavery and its specific connection to the U.S., which is undeniably crucial. However, some argue it sometimes overlooks the broader global history of slavery, which has existed across numerous cultures and civilizations for millennia and involved various perpetrators and victims. This broader context is often ignored or downplayed. Similarly, with biblical land claims, it touches on the historical complexities of land ownership and conflicts in regions like the Middle East, which are often reduced to simpler, more politically convenient narratives. And then America's founding. There's a constant debate between those who want to view it primarily through the lens of its foundational flaws, like slavery, and those who emphasize the revolutionary ideals of liberty and self-governance, even while acknowledging those flaws. The argument is that by selectively ignoring these broader or more nuanced historical truths, progressives create a narrative that is, for some, incomplete, and can lead to misguided policies or an inability to truly understand complex current events, like the situation with Ilhan Omar and the Minnesota fraud.
That's a really comprehensive look at how these historical interpretations can influence current political discussions. So, bringing it all back, we have this massive fraud case in Minnesota, a political figure, Ilhan Omar, whose response is being scrutinized, and then a cultural commentary element with Jennifer Welch and the broader critique of certain liberal voices. What's the overarching takeaway here? What does this confluence of events tell us about the current political climate?
I mean, the overarching takeaway is that we're living in a deeply fractured political and cultural landscape where narratives are everything. This situation really exemplifies how complex issues like a billion-dollar fraud can quickly become entangled with identity politics, historical grievances, and partisan finger-pointing. It highlights a few critical points. First, the intense scrutiny on public officials like Ilhan Omar, where even an ally's exposure can cause significant ripples. Second, it shows the power of narrative control, the attempt to shift the conversation from accountability to victimhood, as seen in Omar's reported response. And third, it underscores the growing tension and pushback against what many perceive as a holier-than-thou attitude from certain progressive voices, as symbolized by Jennifer Welch's comment and the broader critique of liberal white women. Ultimately, it's a snapshot of a moment where factual events are filtered through multiple, often conflicting ideological lenses, making genuine consensus or even a shared understanding incredibly difficult to achieve. It really drives home that in today's environment, the fight isn't just over facts, but over whose interpretation of those facts and history holds sway.
That's a very insightful way to put it. It seems like this story, unfortunate as the fraud itself is, serves as a microcosm of so many larger debates happening in our society right now, from how we address corruption to how we interpret history and the role of identity in our politics. It's clear there are deep divisions that aren't easily mended. Thank you for breaking this down so thoroughly for us. It gives us a lot to think about as we watch these stories continue to develop.
My pleasure. It's certainly a lot to process, and it speaks volumes about the challenges we face in finding common ground. These conversations, even when difficult, are really important for understanding the underlying currents shaping our public discourse. The implications of this Minnesota fraud and the political reactions to it are going to be felt for quite some time, I think. It's definitely one to keep an eye on. Hey guys, do us a favor and share with family and friends. Thanks a bunch.